Hey everyone, Christine Gutierrez, broker associate with eXp Realty. And today I want to talk about how to navigate real estate contracts. So real estate contracts are daunting for most people, but particularly for first-time buyers and sort of newer sellers, right? Or maybe sellers who haven't done it in a long time. There's been so many updates, changes, revisions, more complications to contracts. And so for sellers who have been out of the market for a little while, it's a whole new thing to them. So understanding these legal documents is really crucial, right? In ensuring this sort of smooth transaction and making sure that you as the buyer or seller really feel like you're understanding what's going on. And of course, they're also designed to protect each party's interests in the transaction. Okay. So I want to talk about some of the key components of the real estate contract, and then we'll discuss a little bit about negotiation strategies. So first of all, the key components of a real estate contract, okay? The first one would be sort of identification of the properties, right? Who's the buyer, who's the seller, and then what real estate agents are representing which party. The next thing is that there is a detailed description of the property that's being bought or sold in the contract. So this would include the address and typically includes the assessor's parcel number, APN. It can also, the contract will also detail any specific personal property items that might be included in the sale, such as a refrigerator, stove, those kinds of items. The next thing that everybody thinks is probably the most important is that it specifies the agreed upon purchase price of the property and then outlines how the buyer intends to finance that purchase, whether through a loan or possibly they're just buying it outright with cash, or if there's some other means, but typically it's going to be one of those two in most cases. The next thing that's a huge part of the purchase contract are what we call contingencies. I've talked about contingencies before in some of my other videos, and I encourage you to go check that out in more detail. But essentially, contingencies are conditions that must be met for the contract to proceed. And in most cases, the contingencies are things that the buyer needs to do. It protects the buyer and then allows them sort of an out if for some reason, they're not happy as they proceed through the transaction with the house. So those typical contingencies are the loan approval, the buyer's investigations of the property, and that would include like a home inspection, termite inspection, reviewing seller's disclosures. It also includes an appraisal. And then it can sometimes include possibly the sale of the buyer's current home, right, in order to buy this one. Or in some cases, we have a seller contingency where the sale is contingent upon the seller locating and closing on a replacement property. So those are contingencies. It's a big part of the real estate contract. And you might want to understand that in further detail, but we're going to kind of move on from there. The next term that's part of the purchase contract would be what we call the earnest money deposit, or EMD, or an initial deposit. So that's a sum of money that's provided by the buyer as a sign of good faith. And it is typically deposited via wire into the escrow account within about 3 days of the contract or offer being accepted. And that money is held by escrow throughout the transaction, and then it's credited at closing towards the buyer's purchase price. Okay, that isn't forfeited or in addition to, it is applied to the total funds that the buyer needs in order to close. Okay, so those are the typical terms. Now, when we talk about real estate contracts, for the most part, I'm talking about a purchase agreement for purchasing a home. But in addition to a purchase agreement, we can also have a real estate contract like a lease agreement. So a lease agreement is specifically to govern the rental of a property, and it details the lease terms. What are the rental payments? What are the responsibilities of the landlord and the tenant? And then another one that we can have is a listing agreement. And whenever a real estate agent is listing a home, they sign a listing agreement with that property owner, and it authorizes the agent to market, sell the property, outlines commission, marketing strategies, etc. So those are kind of the typical real estate contracts. But again, the most common would be that purchase agreement. As far as negotiating one of the big things that you need to kind of know, whether you're buyer or seller, is you need to know what your priorities are, right? What is your price range? What are you, as the seller, willing to accept? As the buyer, what are you willing to pay? Do we have specific desired contingencies? Do you need to sell a home to buy this one? Do you need to find a replacement property? What is your timeline? So it's really important when we're getting ready to negotiate on either side that we're very clear what the needs and the limits are for our particular client. One of the best ways to, of course, navigate through this is by hiring a real estate agent to represent you, right? They have a keen understanding of the process and it can advise you and help you through that. And they also understand the local market trends. So overall, just seek professional guidance, get a real estate agent. It's important that you interview agents. Not every agent is built the same. And it's important to find someone that really kind of fits you and fits your style and what you need and understands that. Okay. And then when you are negotiating, make sure that you understand like what you're agreeing to. A good real estate agent, a great real estate agent, is going to take the time and they're going to understand the importance of explaining all of the terms to you. And so if they aren't, then you need to ask questions and make sure that you're fully understanding what you're agreeing to. So overall, navigating real estate contracts is a very complex process, and it's important that you understand those key components, the different types, and then how to kind of negotiate it or what you need to do to be successful. So familiarize yourself with these aspects. Utilize a real estate agent, and you should be able to navigate real estate transactions with confidence and ensure that your interests are protected.